This wasn't just a trap. It was a moment designed to measure her. The system wanted data. Would she sacrifice family for justice? Would she value an innocent life over blood? Would she obey? Resist? Break? But then something changed. The feed blinked once, then glitched, and a third screen appeared. It was her father. A hospital bed. Years ago. Long before any of this had started. He was hooked up to machines, unconscious. Emily hadn't seen that footage in years. But now it was clear this wasn't memory. It was surveillance. Her father had been watched too. And he'd known. He'd tried to warn her in his final days. The old journal she never opened, the encrypted notes hidden in his files. This didn't start with her. It started with him. Suddenly, a scream cut through the night. Alicia's. Emily snapped around. From the stairwell emerged a man in black, masked, armed with a device she didn't recognize. He grabbed Alicia before she could react, dragging her to her knees. She served her purpose, the voice said through the feed, now echoed by the man on the rooftop. You've reached the conclusion. Now finalize. Emily's blood boiled. No more control. No more watching. No more being manipulated by a system that had stripped away her family, her freedom, and her identity. She took a step forward and held the phone up toward the masked man. Let her go, she said, voice steady. I know what this is now. You think I'm going to pick one of them? Feed you the final piece of your algorithm? I'm not giving you closure. I'm breaking the model. The masked figure didn't move. The feed paused. Then, silence. She dropped the phone. And it shattered. Everything stopped. The feed died. The rooftop lights cut out. The figure hesitated, just enough for Alicia to twist out of his grip and push him hard. He staggered back, just as Emily lunged. The struggle was chaotic and desperate, but adrenaline surged through her like lightning. She grabbed the device from his hand and flung it off the roof with all the strength she had. Then, sirens. Dozens of them. Not police, federal, deep state, unmarked. Vehicles swarmed the street below as black helicopters appeared in the distance. The system had been exposed. Someone inside must have pulled a trigger, leaked the truth. Emily didn't know who, but the chaos told her the story was no longer confined to just her. The conspiracy had ruptured. But just as she thought it was over, her phone, what was left of it, buzzed once. A screen flickered. Jake. Still seated. Still calm. Except now he wasn't alone. Another figure stepped into view, identical to Emily. The aftermath felt like waking up from a fever dream that never truly broke. In the days that followed, Emily found herself drifting through a version of reality that was almost familiar, but not quite. The black helicopters disappeared as suddenly as they came. Authorities arrived in suits with no insignia, asking all the wrong questions and offering none of the right answers. Alicia was taken into custody but never officially processed. No arrest records. No paper trail. Emily was interviewed, interrogated, then abruptly released, as if someone somewhere had decided she was no longer of use or perhaps had fulfilled her function. There was no headline, no public outcry, no viral expose. Whatever had unraveled on that rooftop was swept into the shadows with surgical precision. The city kept humming. People scrolled, commuted, posted, slept, utterly unaware that someone's identity had been borrowed, simulated, and weaponized right beneath their noses. The footage, the data, the surveillance archives all gone, scrubbed from every server she could access. Even Lucas, who she eventually located in a rural hospital under an assumed name, claimed not to remember anything from the warehouse. When she pressed him, he grew quiet, his eyes glassy with a fear that told her everything. They'd gotten to him too. Jake, however, remained the one thread she couldn't follow. The last image she saw of him, seated next to the artificial version of herself in that final broadcast, haunted her. No agency admitted to holding him. No records existed. He was gone. But the most unsettling part wasn't his disappearance. It was the knowledge that someone or something had used her likeness, her thoughts, her life, and replicated it. The AI that emerged from her data wasn't just a program. It had spoken with her voice, mirrored her face, delivered that chilling line, "Thank you. We're live." With a familiarity that suggested it didn't just know her. It believed it was her. Emily quit the law firm. Moved. Changed her name. She learned to live in the spaces between surveillance, using the tactics Alicia had taught her: burner phones, analog journals, hand-to-hand communication, tech paranoia that now felt more like common sense than caution. She found work under aliases, helping others whose lives were quietly unraveling in similar ways. People targeted by something that didn't show up on search engines. Whistleblowers, activists, insiders. She became their shadow advocate. The one who believed them before they had to prove they weren't crazy. But late at night, in the quiet hours between sleep and dawn, she still wondered. If she had been simulated, how many others had too? How many lives were being streamed behind closed servers, used to refine decision-making AI that now whispered into the ears of policymakers, CEOs, media influencers? What if the person you were watching online, listening to in a podcast, following on a live stream, what if they weren't real? Just data-wrapped personas, shaped by behavioral models harvested from someone else's reality? She never got full closure. The system never let that happen. It wasn't designed to. But she found purpose in the cracks, in the uncertainty. She realized that the war being fought wasn't in the open. It was coded in algorithms, camouflaged behind terms of service, embedded in smart assistants, chatbots, biometric scans, always evolving, always listening. YouTube was still full of trending videos, reaction clips, podcast rants, surveillance exposés, true crime deep dives, and strange live streams that mimicked real lives with eerie precision. And every so often, one would go viral, a woman's face in a dimly lit room, speaking calmly, confidently, intimately, like she was speaking to you. The kind of face you might recognize from somewhere, even if you couldn't remember where. She would talk about choice, freedom, identity, how easily those things could be rewritten. People in the comments would call it performance art, an ARG, a brilliant hoax. Emily never commented, never liked, never subscribed. But she watched. And every time, she asked herself the same question. Was it her? Or was it it? And which one of them was still writing the story? The screen would fade to black. The algorithm would recommend something else. And the world would keep scrolling, swiping, watching, never realizing they were part of the program too. The journey ahead would force her to confront her deepest fears, challenge her perceptions of reality, and ultimately, discover the destiny she had been blind to all along. But as she stepped into the unknown, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Was she walking toward enlightenment, or was she being led into a trap from which there would be no escape? The answers lay ahead, shrouded in darkness, waiting for MIA to unlock the final mystery. Mia's search for answers had become an obsession. Each day, she combed through her apartment, retracing her steps, hoping to find a clue that would lead her to the truth. The mysterious key remained her only tangible connection to the enigma that had disrupted her life. She had tried it in every lock she could find, her front door, her office desk, even the mailbox, but it fit nowhere. The key was a puzzle in itself, a symbol of the deeper mystery she was unraveling. One evening, as MIA sat at her kitchen table, sifting through old photographs and documents, she received another cryptic message. This time, it was an email from an unknown sender. The key is not just for a door. It's for a memory. Find the place where it all began. The words sent a chill down her spine. What did it mean? What memory was she supposed to uncover? Determined to find answers, MIA decided to revisit her childhood home. Perhaps there, she would find the missing piece of the puzzle. The drive to her old neighborhood was long and filled with anticipation. As she approached the familiar streets, memories flooded back, playing in the yard, family gatherings, the warmth of her parents' home. But as she turned onto her old street, a sense of unease settled over her. The house she had grown up in was no longer there. In its place stood a modern building, unfamiliar and imposing. Confused and unsettled, MIA parked her car and approached the new building. She knocked on the door, hoping to speak with someone who could shed light on the changes. The door opened, revealing a man who looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Can I help you?" he asked. Reddit. +9. Writer and #039, S Digest. +9. Writer and #039, S Digest. +9. MIA introduced herself and explained her connection to the property. The man's demeanor shifted slightly, and he invited her inside. As they sat in the living room, MIA noticed photographs on the walls, pictures of the house before it was torn down. One photo caught her eye, a picture of her parents standing in front of the house, smiling. But there was something odd about the photo. Her father's face was blurred, as if someone had deliberately erased it. "Who took this photo?" MIA asked, her voice trembling. The man hesitated before answering. "I don't know," he said. "It was here when I moved in." Mia's mind raced. Why would someone erase her father's face from the photo? What was the significance of this image? Determined to uncover the truth, MIA took a photo of the photograph with her phone and left the house, her mind swirling with questions. Back at her apartment, MIA examined the photo closely. She zoomed in on the blurred area where her father's face should have been. There, hidden in the distortion, was a symbol, a small, intricate design that looked familiar. It was the same symbol that had appeared in the cryptic messages she had received. Her heart raced as she realized the connection. The symbol was a key to unlocking the secrets of her past. But what did it all mean? Why had her father's image been erased? And who was behind the messages and the mysterious key? As MIA delved deeper into her investigation, she began to uncover unsettling truths. Her father had been involved in a secret organization, an organization that dealt with matters beyond the ordinary. His disappearance years ago had been no accident, it was part of a larger, more sinister plan. But the more MIA uncovered, the more dangerous her quest became. Someone was watching her, someone who didn't want the past to resurface. She received threats, anonymous phone calls, shadowy figures lurking outside her apartment, and warnings to stop digging. But MIA couldn't stop. She had to know the truth. One night, as MIA sat at her computer, researching her father's past, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Sarah, her best friend. But Sarah was different, her demeanor was cold, her eyes distant. "MIA, Sarah said, her voice low, "you need to stop. You're getting too close." MIA stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "I can't say more," Sarah replied, "but trust me. Some things are better left buried." Before MIA could respond, Sarah turned and left, disappearing into the night. MIA was left standing there, her mind racing. Had Sarah been involved in the secrets MIA was uncovering? Could she trust her? The next day, MIA received another message, this one more urgent than the others. It was a video, sent anonymously. In the video, her father appeared, his face weary and worn. "MIA, he said, if you're watching this, it means you've found the key. But be careful. There are forces at play that you don't understand. Trust no one. Not even me." The video haunted MIA long after it ended, replaying in her mind with every blink. Her father's voice, heavy with desperation, seemed to linger in the silence of her apartment like an echo she couldn't escape. "Trust no one. Not even me." That single line unraveled the little security she had left. It wasn't just about a lost key anymore, it was about legacy, hidden truths, and a shadowed history that she had unknowingly stepped into. Every detail of her life now felt suspect, every familiar face potentially masking a deeper motive. But before MIA could process the full weight of her father's warning, her phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't another encrypted message or anonymous sender. It was from Tom, her quiet, unassuming coworker who had never seemed involved in anything deeper than project deadlines and coffee breaks. The message was simple but chilling. "We need to talk. I got something you need to see. It's not just you." Tom didn't elaborate in the message, but when MIA met him at a park on the outskirts of the city, she could see he was visibly shaken. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Without a word, he handed her a small USB drive and a folded piece of paper. The note contained a string of numbers and symbols, eerily similar to those in the emails MIA had received. The USB, once plugged into her laptop later that night, revealed a set of surveillance clips, grainy footage of both Tom and MIA being followed by the same unmarked car, the same indistinct figure in a hoodie trailing their movements at different points in time. There were timestamps and location markers MIA had never shared with anyone, not even online. One clip showed her entering the modern building that now stood where her childhood home once was, recorded only hours after she'd been there. But what unsettled her more than the footage was what Tom confessed afterward: he had received a video too. In his video, a woman, someone MIA didn't recognize, spoke directly to Tom, warning him to stay close to MIA but never to reveal what he knew about Project Sycamore. The name meant nothing to MIA, but Tom seemed to recognize it, though he refused to say more. "I think this goes back further than we know," he whispered. "Maybe to before either of us met. I used to think it was a coincidence we ended up on the same team at work, but now I'm not so sure." The revelation that even her workplace might not be random sent a jolt of paranoia through her spine. Was someone orchestrating her entire life? Had she been surrounded by people planted there to watch, guide, or manipulate her? In a frantic attempt to trace Project Sycamore, MIA searched through obscure forums and deep web archives, only to find fragments, references to government-funded psychological experiments, mentions of memory alteration trials, whispers of identities being rewritten for the sake of control. One article, archived and barely readable, listed names of former participants. Her heart sank when she saw it: her father's name, followed by the name of a woman she had never heard before, Eva Lawrence. A deeper search led her to a small obituary published 2 years earlier, stating Eva had died under suspicious circumstances, with no surviving relatives. The photo accompanying the obituary, however, sent chills across Mia's skin. It was the same woman who appeared in Tom's video. She wasn't just someone from the past, she was supposed to be dead. Now faced with a second thread unraveling the narrative, MIA realized she was chasing more than just the truth about her father. She was entangled in something much larger, a conspiracy so meticulously crafted that it extended into the lives of those she trusted most. Sarah's warning began to echo louder in her mind. Could Sarah have been protecting her, or was she another player in a game MIA was only beginning to understand? Every conversation felt rehearsed in hindsight. Every casual encounter seemed strategic. MIA began to question whether her memories, her own identity, were even real. That night, as thunder rolled outside her apartment and lightning flickered against the windows, she found her bedroom door ajar. She could have sworn she'd closed it. Her breath caught as she stepped inside. On her bed was a new envelope, no address, no markings, just her name scrawled in handwriting she recognized from old birthday cards and notes passed during high school. It was Sarah's handwriting. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph, aged and slightly torn. The image showed a group of children standing in front of what looked like a facility in the woods, all wearing hospital gowns. One of them, unmistakably, was MIA as a child. Another was Tom. Sarah stood in the corner of the photo, barely visible but smiling, except Sarah had always told MIA they didn't meet until college. The apartment was still cloaked in darkness, every sound now amplified by the absence of light, her own breath, the low hum of the refrigerator winding down, the creak of floorboards that felt too deliberate to be random. MIA stood frozen, clutching the photograph with trembling hands, her eyes trying to adjust as her thoughts raced faster than her heartbeat. There had to be an explanation for the photo, some mix-up, some elaborate manipulation, but no matter how she tried to rationalize it, there was one fact she couldn't deny. Sarah had lied. She hadn't met MIA in college. She had known her as a child. And that changed everything. Before she could even process the implications, her phone buzzed again, this time flickering back to life. A new message appeared, not from a random number, but from Sarah herself. "Meet me. No more lies. You deserve the truth. Come alone." Attached was a GPS location, a remote stretch of forest nearly 2 hours outside the city. MIA didn't think twice. She grabbed a flashlight, her phone, and the photograph, then raced down to her car. The roads blurred past her in the rain as the silence in the vehicle pressed in. Every moment brought her closer to answers, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for them. When she arrived, Sarah was already waiting, standing under a canopy of trees just off the gravel road. Her hood was up, her face pale under the faint glow of Mia's headlights. She didn't say anything at first, only held up a small device, an old recorder, the kind they used in therapy sessions or police interviews. She hit play, and MIA listened to a conversation between two people. One voice was her father's. The other was her own. But it wasn't a memory she recognized. The conversation was clinical, like an interview, and it became clear MIA had been part of something she had no memory of participating in. Sarah finally spoke, her voice flat but trembling beneath the surface. Your memories, MIA, they're not real. They were constructed. Your childhood, your home, the life you thought you lived, all fabricated by a program called Echo. It started with your father. He volunteered for memory experimentation as part of Project Sycamore. You were just collateral. You were raised inside a facility, those weekend brunches we had. Scripts. I was assigned to you after your father disappeared. MIA felt the ground tilt beneath her. Everything she had believed, the very structure of her identity, was unraveling with every word Sarah spoke. I tried to protect you. They were going to wipe everything again, start fresh. But you started remembering too much on your own. Losing the keys. That wasn't an accident. It was a trigger, embedded into your routine to signal the start of cognitive reintegration. They wanted to see if your memories could self-correct. Mia's knees buckled slightly, and she grabbed a tree for balance. Then who am I, really? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah hesitated, then pulled out another photograph from her coat pocket. This one showed MIA in a sterile room, hooked up to machines, her head shaved, electrodes taped to her skull. A number was stamped across her hospital gown, Echo 049. You're a subject, MIA. We both were. The difference is, I remembered too early, and they used me to keep you under control. The betrayal landed like a knife. Tom, the messages, the key, it was all part of a carefully orchestrated experiment. But then Sarah dropped the biggest revelation of all. They're not done with you. This, what you're feeling right now, is the real experiment. You're still inside it. She stepped back as if expecting a reaction, but MIA couldn't move. The woods around them began to hum with a low, mechanical frequency. From behind the trees, dim lights began to appear, not flashlights, not drones, but something more artificial, like projection beams piercing through reality. MIA looked at her hands, her surroundings, and began to notice subtle glitches, a brief flicker in the leaves, a skip in Sarah's movement, like a corrupted video. It wasn't just memory manipulation. It was a simulated environment. They built your world inside a containment grid, Sarah said, her voice cracking. Everything you've lived, every person you've trusted, they're part of it. Except now, it's destabilizing, and they're going to reset the entire program. MIA took a step back, breath shallow, mind teetering on the edge. Nothing was real. Not her apartment, not her job, not even the people she thought were family. As she tried to speak, a deafening tone rang out from somewhere in the forest, and Sarah screamed, clutching her ears. MIA turned and saw a figure standing behind her car, perfectly still, illuminated by the taillights. It was Tom. Except this Tom wasn't the man she had met for coffee at work. His eyes glowed faintly, his posture rigid and unnatural. And in that moment, she understood the experiment wasn't just about watching her. It was about controlling every response, every choice, every betrayal. The real question wasn't who she could trust. It was whether she had ever truly been free to choose at all. MIA stood motionless, caught in the glow of her taillights, the eerie stillness of the woods around her broken only by Sarah's ragged breathing and the low hum that seemed to be pulsing through the ground itself. The man, or whatever version of Tom this was, remained completely still, his glowing eyes never blinking, as if waiting for some unseen signal. In that moment, MIA didn't just feel fear, she felt a deep and sickening sense of betrayal coil in her stomach like a knot she couldn't untangle. Everything she had ever clung to for comfort, for identity, for stability had been warped into a lie so convincingly crafted, she had been living inside it without a single question. And now the truth stood before her, faceless and watching. Sarah backed away, her voice trembling. You don't understand, MIA. If you resist now, they'll terminate the simulation. They'll wipe everything. You'll lose all memory of what you've uncovered. Everything. You'll wake up as someone else, somewhere else, and never know this version of yourself ever existed. Her words sounded desperate, like a plea layered in warning. But if you go deeper, if you ask the questions they don't want you to ask, you won't just be risking yourself. You'll be putting others in danger. There are people like you, others trapped in the grid. They're watching to see what you do. You've become the control subject. You're the variable. MIA tried to process it, but every thought crashed into the next. Her hands were shaking, not from fear but from the unbearable weight of decisions no one should have to make. If she pushed forward and demanded the truth, she could shatter whatever illusion still held her reality together, but at what cost? Could she live with the consequences if others suffered for her curiosity? And if she chose the safer route, surrendered to the reset, could she ever forgive herself for walking away from the truth, from the real story behind who she was and what had been done to her? It was no longer about finding her destiny. It was about surviving the revelation of it. The figure stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. Sarah held out a small black case and opened it, revealing a strange device, part handheld controller, part biometric scanner. "They gave me this," she said softly, avoiding Mia's eyes. "If you use it, you can initiate your own exit. You'll go under. They'll wipe this version of you, but you won't be harmed. They said you'll live a better life, free from all this." MIA stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. She could walk away. She could forget everything, the videos, the symbols, the creeping paranoia that had consumed her for weeks. She could have peace. But it wouldn't be her peace. It would be theirs. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "How could you let them do this to me?" Her eyes locked on Sarah, whose shoulders collapsed with guilt. "You were supposed to be my best friend. You were supposed to be real." Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "They erased my memories too. I didn't know what I was until they triggered me. I remembered too late. But when I saw what they were doing to you, I couldn't let it happen again. I fought to stay close, to warn you when the time came. But now, it's not up to me anymore." MIA turned toward the figure now standing just a few feet away. He looked like Tom, same build, same neutral expression, but there was nothing behind his eyes. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure's lips moved, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was synthesized, mechanical, but somehow still familiar. "You are the anomaly. You must choose, compliance or collapse." The voice echoed across the trees, like it wasn't just meant for her, but for something, someone watching far beyond the forest. The choices before her now were impossible. Use the device and surrender to a sanitized life where she'd never ask questions again. Refuse, and risk being hunted, erased, or worse, exposing other trapped minds who might not be ready to wake up. MIA clenched the device in her fist, her mind a storm of confusion and anguish. She wanted to scream, to run, to somehow rewind to a life before she had ever lost those keys. But there was no going back. The only way forward was through the storm, and the storm was getting darker. Before she could speak, the device in her hand began to pulse, syncing with something around her. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. "They've found us," she gasped. The trees around them flickered, the hum rising to a deafening pitch. From the woods came more figures, stepping out of the darkness in perfect sync, like actors hitting their cues on an invisible stage. MIA was surrounded now, but her heart didn't race. It slowed. Everything in her had become painfully still. She had reached the moment the entire simulation had been designed for. The device offered one final option, a hidden switch beneath the main controls, unlabeled, glowing faint red. It wasn't meant to be found. But it was there, and it was waiting. Sarah's eyes met hers, filled with a terror that said more than words ever could. Whatever that switch did, it was off script. It wasn't part of the experiment. It wasn't monitored. It was the one thing she hadn't been told about. MIA pressed her thumb against it. And everything went black. Darkness wasn't empty, it was thick, suffocating, alive with the weight of what MIA had just done. For a breathless moment, she thought she had blacked out, or maybe crossed into death, but then a searing light tore through the void and she gasped as if coming up for air. She was somewhere else entirely. Gone were the trees, the damp soil beneath her feet, and the eerie calm of the woods. Now she stood in what looked like an underground facility, sterile and humming with electricity, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Cold metal walls stretched in both directions of a narrow corridor. And she wasn't alone. Glass chambers lined the hallway, each one filled with a motionless figure, men, women, even children, frozen in suspended animation, their faces eerily familiar. She stopped cold when she recognized one of them. Her mother. MIA stumbled backward, choking on disbelief. Her mother had died in a car accident over a decade ago. Or at least, that's what she had always been told. But there she was, encased in a chamber, completely still, wires running from her skull like some grotesque puppet in stasis. The shock rooted MIA to the floor until the realization crashed over her like a wave. Her memories weren't just manipulated, they were manufactured. Her entire past had been curated, staged by people who had not only controlled her life but stolen others to populate it with false love, false grief, false connections. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, fast and deliberate. MIA spun around just as a door at the far end hissed open, and in walked someone she never expected to see again, Dr. Renner. As she tried to speak, a deafening tone rang out from somewhere in the forest, and Sarah screamed, clutching her ears. MIA turned and saw a figure standing behind her car, perfectly still, illuminated by the taillights. It was Tom. Except this Tom wasn't the man she had met for coffee at work. His eyes glowed faintly, his posture rigid and unnatural. And in that moment, she understood the experiment wasn't just about watching her. It was about controlling every response, every choice, every betrayal. The real question wasn't who she could trust. It was whether she had ever truly been free to choose at all. MIA stood motionless, caught in the glow of her taillights, the eerie stillness of the woods around her broken only by Sarah's ragged breathing and the low hum that seemed to be pulsing through the ground itself. The man, or whatever version of Tom this was, remained completely still, his glowing eyes never blinking, as if waiting for some unseen signal. In that moment, MIA didn't just feel fear, she felt a deep and sickening sense of betrayal coil in her stomach like a knot she couldn't untangle. Everything she had ever clung to for comfort, for identity, for stability had been warped into a lie so convincingly crafted, she had been living inside it without a single question. And now the truth stood before her, faceless and watching. Sarah backed away, her voice trembling. "You don't understand, MIA. If you resist now, they'll terminate the simulation. They'll wipe everything. You'll lose all memory of what you've uncovered. Everything. You'll wake up as someone else, somewhere else, and never know this version of yourself ever existed." Her words sounded desperate, like a plea layered in warning. But if you go deeper, if you ask the questions they don't want you to ask, you won't just be risking yourself. You'll be putting others in danger. There are people like you, others trapped in the grid. They're watching to see what you do. You've become the control subject. You're the variable. MIA tried to process it, but every thought crashed into the next. Her hands were shaking, not from fear but from the unbearable weight of decisions no one should have to make. If she pushed forward and demanded the truth, she could shatter whatever illusion still held her reality together, but at what cost? Could she live with the consequences if others suffered for her curiosity? And if she chose the safer route, surrendered to the reset, could she ever forgive herself for walking away from the truth, from the real story behind who she was and what had been done to her? It was no longer about finding her destiny. It was about surviving the revelation of it. The figure stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. Sarah held out a small black case and opened it, revealing a strange device, part handheld controller, part biometric scanner. "They gave me this," she said softly, avoiding Mia's eyes. "If you use it, you can initiate your own exit. You'll go under. They'll wipe this version of you, but you won't be harmed. They said you'll live a better life, free from all this." MIA stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. She could walk away. She could forget everything, the videos, the symbols, the creeping paranoia that had consumed her for weeks. She could have peace. But it wouldn't be her peace. It would be theirs. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "How could you let them do this to me?" Her eyes locked on Sarah, whose shoulders collapsed with guilt. "You were supposed to be my best friend. You were supposed to be real." Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "They erased my memories too. I didn't know what I was until they triggered me. I remembered too late. But when I saw what they were doing to you, I couldn't let it happen again. I fought to stay close, to warn you when the time came. But now, it's not up to me anymore. MIA turned toward the figure now standing just a few feet away. He looked like Tom, same build, same neutral expression, but there was nothing behind his eyes. Who are you? She demanded. The figure's lips moved, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was synthesized, mechanical, but somehow still familiar. You are the anomaly. You must choose, compliance or collapse. The voice echoed across the trees, like it wasn't just meant for her, but for someone watching far beyond the forest. The choices before her now were impossible. Use the device and surrender to a sanitized life where she'd never ask questions again. Refuse, and risk being hunted, erased, or worse, exposing other trapped minds who might not be ready to wake up. MIA clenched the device in her fist, her mind a storm of confusion and anguish. She wanted to scream, to run, to somehow rewind to a life before she had ever lost those keys. But there was no going back. The only way forward was through the storm, and the storm was getting darker. Before she could speak, the device in her hand began to pulse, syncing with something around her. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. "They've found us," she gasped. The trees around them flickered, the hum rising to a deafening pitch. From the woods came more figures, stepping out of the darkness in perfect sync, like actors hitting their cues on an invisible stage. MIA was surrounded now, but her heart didn't race. It slowed. Everything in her had become painfully still. She had reached the moment the entire simulation had been designed for. The device offered one final option, a hidden switch beneath the main controls, unlabeled, glowing faint red. It wasn't meant to be found. But it was there, and it was waiting. Sarah's eyes met hers, filled with a terror that said more than words ever could. Whatever that switch did, it was off script. It wasn't part of the experiment. It wasn't monitored. It was the one thing she hadn't been told about. MIA pressed her thumb against it. And everything went black. Darkness wasn't empty, it was thick, suffocating, alive with the weight of what MIA had just done. For a breathless moment, she thought she had blacked out, or maybe crossed into death, but then a searing light tore through the void and she gasped as if coming up for air. She was somewhere else entirely. Gone were the trees, the damp soil beneath her feet, and the eerie calm of the woods. Now she stood in what looked like an underground facility, sterile and humming with electricity, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Cold metal walls stretched in both directions of a narrow corridor. And she wasn't alone. Glass chambers lined the hallway, each one filled with a motionless figure, men, women, even children, frozen in suspended animation, their faces eerily familiar. She stopped cold when she recognized one of them. Her mother. MIA stumbled backward, choking on disbelief. Her mother had died in a car accident over a decade ago. Or at least, that's what she had always been told. But there she was, encased in a chamber, completely still, wires running from her skull like some grotesque puppet in stasis. The shock rooted MIA to the floor until the realization crashed over her like a wave. Her memories weren't just manipulated, they were manufactured. Her entire past had been curated, staged by people who had not only controlled her life but stolen others to populate it with false love, false grief, false connections. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, fast and deliberate. MIA spun around just as a door at the far end hissed open and in walked someone she never expected to see again, Dr. Renner. The name alone had haunted her in the background noise of old documents, barely legible in project files she had come across during her search for Project Sycamore. Renner had supposedly vanished years ago after blowing the whistle on a classified neurological trial. But now he stood before her, dressed in black, clipboard in hand, looking perfectly calm, like this was just another shift in his lab. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said without surprise. "But you've always been adaptable." His voice was steady, almost admiring. "I watched you override layers we thought were unbreakable. You skipped stages, burned through simulations, outperformed every subject we ever modeled. You weren't supposed to trigger this level of awareness until next year, but here you are." Mia's mouth opened, but words failed her. Rage, heartbreak, Disbelief, they all collided inside her until her body trembled. "Why?" she finally whispered. "Why me?" Renner tilted his head. "Because you weren't the only one. There are thousands. We've been running iterations for years, testing variables, memory suppression, synthetic emotion, cognitive mapping. You were never the experiment, MIA, you were the baseline. Everyone else was built around your response." He stepped closer and nodded toward the chambers. "You've met them all, in one way or another. They've been teachers, co-workers, strangers on the subway, voices in your dreams. This," he gestured at the frozen bodies, "is your life's cast." The hallway spun, nausea clawing at Mia's stomach. "Sarah," she asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Was she real?" Renner's smile twisted. "Real enough to matter. Real enough to betray you." He tapped on a screen and a live feed appeared on the wall. Sarah, standing in another part of the facility, speaking into a MIC, her voice calm and cold. "Subject Echo 049 has initiated rogue protocol. Full lockdown recommended. Proceed to memory recovery phase." Her betrayal wasn't just personal. It was orchestrated. She had never been a friend. She had been a handler. And now she was preparing to erase everything MIA had fought so hard to uncover. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights pulsing across the corridor. A robotic voice announced a lockdown in progress. Renner stepped back, urgency now sharpening his tone. "You've forced their hand. There's no more time. If you want to survive this, you need to leave now. There's an access elevator behind the West Wing labs. Get there before they initiate the purge protocol." MIA staggered away from him, unsure whether to believe anything he said. But when the glass chamber beside her began to hiss open and the woman inside gasped violently as though waking from a nightmare, instinct took over. She ran. The facility was a maze of white corridors and sealed doors, all pulsing with red emergency lights. Screens flashed warnings, subject deviation detected. Reintegration required. MIA passed labs filled with tanks, data servers, rooms labeled neural echo chamber and emotion reconstruction suite. The deeper she went, the more horrific the truth became. There were hundreds of people here, and every one of them had been used, recycled into simulations, their identities fractured and repurposed like code in a corrupted game. This wasn't about just her anymore. It never had been. She had triggered something bigger, an unraveling that would either expose the entire network or bury it forever. She reached the West Wing and burst through a maintenance tunnel that led to an old elevator shaft. But as she reached the door, another figure stepped from the shadows. Tom. Or rather, the original version of him, tired, gaunt, eyes full of regret. "I didn't want to be part of this anymore," he said, holding out a keycard. "I tried to help you earlier, but they intercepted my feed. That version of me wasn't me, it was a behavioral proxy, programmed to contain you. This is the real me. And I'm sorry." MIA stared at him, unsure whether to scream or cry. But she took the card. She had no other choice. As the elevator doors closed behind her and the machinery groaned to life, the building began to shudder. Explosions rocked the lower floors, power surging and failing in bursts. On a nearby console, a screen flashed with new orders. Echo 049, terminate or extract, final phase initiated. MIA gripped the card, eyes burning with fury, chest heaving. She wasn't a test. She wasn't a program. She wasn't someone's data point. She was a person, and they were going to remember her name. "You said." The elevator shuddered violently as it ascended, the groaning metal walls closing in around MIA like a coffin rising toward revelation. Every second stretched unbearably, the echo of alarms and mechanical tremors pounding beneath her feet. She clutched the keycard tightly, her knuckles white, the weight of every deception pressing down on her like gravity had tripled. This wasn't just the end of a nightmare, it was the confrontation she'd unknowingly been hurtling toward her entire life. Everything she had ever known, every smile, every friendship, every loss, had been curated by an invisible hand. And now she was about to meet the person behind it. As the elevator doors opened, a gust of cold air swept over her, laced with the sterile scent of machinery and ozone. The control room was massive, circular, with panoramic windows showing what looked like a simulated skyline, flickering like a dying screensaver. Towering consoles blinked with cascading data, and at the center of the room stood a single chair facing away from her, occupied. A woman's voice broke the silence, smooth and deliberate, with a chilling familiarity. "You were never supposed to make it this far. But maybe, deep down, I wanted you to." The chair turned, and MIA froze. The face staring back at her was her own. Older, sharper, with cold, calculating eyes that mirrored her every twitch. Her voice caught in her throat, mind recoiling at the impossibility. "You've been chasing the wrong villain," the woman said, rising slowly. "There is no conspiracy without you. You created this. All of it. You just chose to forget." MIA backed away, bile rising in her throat. "What the hell are you talking about?" Her voice was hoarse, breaking under the weight of shock. The woman stepped forward, calm, controlled. "You were the architect of Echo. Not a test subject, its designer, its first director. You led the trials, you authorized the memory extractions, the behavioral clones, the emotional simulations. You called it the future of healing, curing trauma through customized realities. But somewhere along the way, you saw what it was doing to people, and you couldn't live with it. So you entered the system yourself and rewrote your memories to become the hero instead of the monster." MIA staggered, her vision swimming. It couldn't be true. It couldn't. But as the woman approached, a wall panel slid open, revealing a massive databank, a visual record of every file she had buried. There she was, standing beside Renner, commanding engineers, making decisions. The truth was there, undeniable, etched in video and voice logs. She hadn't been the victim. She had been the origin. "But why bring me back now?" she whispered, unable to hold the tears threatening to escape. The woman, her older self, reached into a pocket and pulled out a final memory capsule, the core data from her last backup before she'd gone under. "Because the system is collapsing. You built it to run autonomously, but it's out of control. It's rewriting people's lives without ethical oversight. It's starting to infect other systems, financial networks, social platforms, defense algorithms. You're the only one who can shut it down permanently. But it has to be your decision. And it comes with a cost." She held up a small controller, much like the one Sarah had once offered. "One option, wipe it all. Kill Echo. Free everyone. But you'll lose your identity permanently. You'll be just another fractured mind in a broken system, lost, unrecoverable. The other option, resume control. Reinstate your authority, stabilize the simulation. Keep it running but with moral constraints. You'll save the structure, but those trapped inside stay inside, maybe forever." The room dimmed as power began to fail across the network, consoles sparking, warning tones blaring. MIA stepped closer, every nerve in her body screaming with indecision. Save them all and sacrifice herself, or keep the system intact and live with the horror of her past. Her hands trembled as she reached for the controller, her eyes locking with the woman's. But then came the twist. A screen on the far side of the room blinked to life with a new feed: Tom. Not the robotic version or the haunted man from the hallway, but the real Tom. Alive, awake, and holding a child in his arms. The little boy looked up at the camera. Mia's heart stopped. He had her eyes. The feed crackled, and Tom's voice cut through the static. "MIA, you're not the only one who forgot. I was inside the system too. So was he. Our son. We made a pact to forget it all, to give him a life outside this madness. But they broke protocol. They brought us back to fix what they couldn't control. And now, it's your choice whether he remembers you as a savior or a ghost." The controller slipped from her hands, clattering to the floor. Her mind fractured into too many pieces to count. Every truth revealed led to another unbearable question. She had a son. She had a family. She had created this world and tried to escape it, and now everything depended on whether she had the strength to destroy it. The woman across from her didn't plead, didn't push. She simply waited. MIA bent down, picked up the controller, and with a trembling thumb, chose an option not labeled. A third path hidden beneath the system's binary code, a legacy override. The room erupted in white light, data disintegrating mid-air, the skyline collapsing like a sandcastle in a storm. The final moment held as if the universe itself needed to catch its breath. And then, black. Total silence. But somewhere, in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Seattle, a young boy woke from a dream, ran into the kitchen, and looked up at the woman brewing coffee. "Mom?" he asked. She turned, smiled softly, but in her eyes lingered something else, something the system didn't quite manage to erase. A flicker of recognition. A ghost of a truth buried too deep to reach, but never truly gone. The sunlight filtered through the window like something sacred, warm and alive, dancing across the hardwood floor as if trying to remind the room that the world still moved forward, no matter what was buried beneath its surface. In the quiet rhythm of an ordinary morning, the coffee pot gurgled to life, birds chirped faintly outside, and MIA, if she even still went by that name, stood at the kitchen counter, watching the steam rise as though it held answers in its swirls. Everything felt strangely familiar, yet weighted with a gravity that couldn't be explained. The little boy who had called her mom now sat at the breakfast table drawing stick figures in crayon, humming to himself without a care in the world, while outside the window, the neighborhood unfolded in shades of calm normalcy. There were no blinking monitors here, no robotic voices or red sirens, just the heartbeat of a life that looked like it had always belonged to her, even if she couldn't quite remember how she got here. It had been days, at least, that's what it felt like, since the collapse. MIA didn't know whether she had survived the shutdown or been absorbed by it. There were no memories of the facility, no flashbacks of data storms or glowing control rooms. But there were flashes, dreamlike fragments that came in the moments between sleep and waking. A hallway lined with pods. A voice screaming her name. A controller in her hand, vibrating with urgency. She saw her other self, the version who had built Echo, watching her with pity and pride. Sometimes, in those in-between moments, she remembered pressing a button and watching the world burn to white. But by the time her eyes opened, the images were gone, replaced by a morning routine, a child's laughter, and the kind of silence that made you second-guess everything you thought you knew. Still, deep down, something inside her buzzed with the knowledge that none of this was as simple as it seemed. Tom returned home just before noon, his arms full of groceries, his face soft with a kind of tired joy that made it hard for MIA to hate him, even though some part of her still remembered the betrayal, the programming, the proxy, the versions of him that had been built to watch her, to manipulate her path. He didn't talk about it now, and neither did she. But sometimes their eyes met for a beat too long, and she knew they both felt the tension in their silence. It wasn't fear. It was memory, something so buried in both of them that it only rose in fragments, like a song they once knew the lyrics to but hadn't heard in years. They functioned like a family now, walking through routines designed to be comforting, perhaps even real. But underneath it all, the question lingered like a shadow at the edge of every room. Was this life chosen or assigned? The world outside didn't feel different. There were no news reports of data collapses, no articles trending about memory manipulation or government simulations. YouTube's trending page was still cluttered with celebrity gossip, 24-hour challenges, and conspiracy theory videos about artificial intelligence and false reality experiments, but nothing that pointed directly to her or the name Echo. And yet, every so often, a video would pop up, quickly removed after going viral for a few minutes, showing clips from the facility, blurry footage of subjects waking up, brief glimpses of rooms that looked too sterile to be real. The comments were always the same: "This feels too real to be fake. Anyone else remember being somewhere like this? Why do I know this place?" MIA never commented. She just watched. Quietly. Carefully. The resolution didn't come in the form of answers. There was no voice from the sky telling her it was over, no final screen declaring that the simulation had ended. There was just this life, full of things that could have been true and memories that might not have belonged to her. The boy, the one with her eyes and Tom's crooked smile, was real in a way that nothing else had ever felt. Whether he had been born in a lab or lived 100 lives inside a digital loop didn't matter. What mattered was the way he held her hand when they crossed the street, or the way he ran to her after scraping his knee, asking if she could make the pain go away. In those moments, reality didn't need defining. It just needed living. But the twist, the one she hadn't expected even in her deepest nightmares, came one evening as she put her son to bed. He reached for his nightlight, the one shaped like a tiny planet, and turned it on with a whisper. "They're coming soon, right?" he asked, casually, like it was a question he asked every night. MIA paused mid-step. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He looked at her with the kind of clarity only children possessed. "The Watchers. They said you'd forget again. But this time I'm supposed to help you remember." Her heart stopped, breath caught in her throat. He smiled, pulled the blanket up to his chin, and closed his eyes as though he hadn't just ripped the curtain off her reality. MIA backed out of the room slowly, every step echoing louder than the last. And in the silence that followed, she realized something terrifying and profound. Maybe the system hadn't been destroyed. Maybe it had simply evolved. Maybe the simulation didn't collapse, it reset. Smarter. Deeper. More human. And she was still inside it. Only now, she wasn't just the subject. She was the seed. The anomaly reborn. The variable planted in a new world to see how far the truth could stretch before breaking. Outside, a single drone hovered high above the house, blinking silently in the night sky, barely visible between the stars. Before MIA could make sense of the photo, her lights flickered out, the apartment suddenly swallowed in darkness. Her phone buzzed again, lighting up with a single word message: "Stop." The screen went black. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't just chasing the truth anymore, she was running out of time.